Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well, healthy and happy. In this video I want to talk to you about the situation that's happening in South Africa. That nation is quickly descending into complete chaos. There is currently a campaign, and a lot of people won't want to hear this because they have their own biases in many respects, right? And because of that, factual information, unfortunately, doesn't filter through to their minds. But there is a campaign right now on the part of the ruling party which is seeking to commit an ethnic genocide. Okay? And that genocide, well, they want to perpetrate it against the white farmers. Now, because it's against white people, apparently we're not allowed to talk about it. And in fact, you can't even, in polite company, call it a genocide, because these folks on the far left, who are part of this radical leftist establishment, who have very strong communist sympathies, if not are outright communists, don't want to talk about it, right? Because the way they see it, what they do is map class struggle onto ethnic struggles or gender struggles and so on, right? But in South Africa right now, there are roughly 47 murders per day. Okay? Now, that is far beyond any other civilized nation. Okay? And there is a rape committed every 26 seconds. Just take a look at the statistics, and you'll see this to be true. So, what has happened is that because of political mismanagement and corruption, the nation is falling very quickly into this hellish nightmare. And they're also pushing, and in fact have passed, I believe, many of these reforms, as they call them, for agrarian land reform, right? Now this sounds very innocuous, doesn't it? It sounds like something that wouldn't cause any kind of real fallout. Unless, of course, you're an economist, then you'll understand that it obviously does economically. Because agrarian reform is something that every communist party on earth has basically done. And if you take a look at what happened with the agrarian reform in the Soviet Union with the kulaks, which is where the term gulag, by the way, later came from, you'll see that mass murders were committed in order to allow the state to take control of private property, the land that belonged to private citizens. And this same thing happened in China, right? The Chinese farmers, when the land was taken away from them by the state through use of violent means, tens of millions of people were murdered by the state. Okay, that was part of Chairman Mao's Great Leap Forward. And then China went through a massive famine, as did the Soviet Union, particularly in the Ukraine, of course. And you'll see the same thing happened in Cuba when they initiated agrarian land reform. And what happened there? Again, Cuba's economy completely tanked. Right? But let's leave the economics aside for 1 second. Because the same thing's happening in South Africa now, but let's leave the economics aside for 1 second. Obviously, the predominant people that were farming in South Africa, who owned the land that was producing the necessary crops or whatever else, the livestock and so forth, were white. That was because, obviously, again, of apartheid. Right? So when the government in South Africa is calling for land reform, as they're calling it, or agrarian reform, they are sanctifying the act of state murder. And this murder, because the farmers in South Africa, again, are predominantly white, is leading to the murder, the killing of white farmers. Okay, that's a really, really serious problem. And if that wasn't enough, they're exacerbating the racial tensions inside the country, pushing for agitation so that violent crimes are committed against white citizens in South Africa. It's astounding to me that this is not being spoken about by the mainstream media. Because what we are witnessing there is an extreme form of racism, and I would say it is ethnic genocide. And it is just as serious as the genocide that happened in Rwanda. Okay, now, don't get me wrong, apartheid was not a pleasant state of affairs, okay, for black people in South Africa. Just like segregation in the United States of America was not great for black people in terms of the continuation of this imposition of tyranny on their person, right? But, and this is extraordinarily important, and most people, again, will not speak about this, the parties that came to power after Nelson Mandela and during Nelson Mandela's incarceration, the parties that pushed for the change in government in South Africa to a communist socialist state were allied with the former Soviet Union. That is a verifiable fact. Okay? And so this communist agenda, unfortunately, has continued even after the perceived downfall of the Soviet Union into current times. And what is happening there? The whole country has spun out of control. There's this horrific practice of necklacing that is going on in South Africa, which again most people won't speak about because it interferes with their narrative of white privilege. Okay? And you read some of these stories that are coming out of South Africa, or you see what is happening there, or you hear it from people who are living in South Africa, and my God, it is horrific. It is a nightmare of epic proportions. And one of the worst things about this is that not only is it not being reported in the mainstream media in countries like the United States of America or in the UK or across Europe or Canada or anywhere else, but also that the governments of these countries are denying people who are in South Africa, who are trying to flee because of this, who happen to be white, they are denying them the ability to do so, to seek asylum in these countries. And so people are dying in horrific ways. And again, as I say, it's state-sanctioned murder. And there's only a handful of people that will even speak about this. This is a communist agenda that's being carried out in South Africa. And they're using race to do it. All this race-baiting, this is what's going on in the current time. It's shocking, it's astounding to see that black people who are active in any of these countries in the West are not speaking about this. Because if human rights apply to you, then they apply to other people. Okay, to ignore the God-given rights of any human being is an act of evil. You are born with these rights to live without being molested violently. You're born with that right. And when people impose violent actions, violent tyranny, these tyrants, when they do this, that is a moral wrong. I'm surprised people aren't understanding this. Okay, let me tell you something. The same people that were outraged by apartheid should also be protesting this. But they're not. Do you know why? Because they're biased. And because the only thing they're interested in is race baiting. See, the color of the people involved who are being murdered should not matter if you are truly an advocate for human rights. Okay? But these people, again, don't give a damn. But I thought it was important to speak about this because, again, no one else virtually is, except a handful of people. As a non-white person, I am offended by this practice. This is a racist practice. How dare these people who behave in these tyrannical ways, who keep supporting evil governments, particularly the communist, statist, socialist movements that spring up, how dare these people do that? And how dare these countries that we are all living in the West, how dare they deny these people the right to seek asylum in these countries when they're so ardent about allowing migrants in from Islamist countries who hold Islamist worldviews? It's fascinating to see this cognitive dissonance in people. You know, I mean, it's again, I don't know what to say to this. This is a completely inhumane thing that is happening. This is something that the whole international community should be outraged about, but they're not. Why isn't the UN saying something about this? Well, we all know the reasons why. I've talked about this before. The UN was put in place as a communist mouthpiece. Okay? But I think we have to talk about it. We have to start talking about this problem that's happening in South Africa if we don't want more people to be killed, to be murdered, to be massacred, to be raped. Let's see what happens. Is anyone else going to talk about this? Or are we just going to put our fingers in our ears, close our eyes and pretend it's not happening when these kind of god-awful things happen, when this evil is perpetrated? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Take good care of yourselves. And let's all pray for South Africa.